Hey, all my IFG friends, this is Steve. I want to say, if you like movies like I do, we've started a new podcast called Happy Hour Flicks. You can find it anywhere podcasts are found. It's all about nostalgic movies that we love, and we bring on special guests each episode, and we also have specialty cocktails made for each one, too. So it really is an hour of a good time talking about movies that we love, like Gremlins, Seven, Free Willy. We talk about The Last Starfighter also. I mean, we kind of run the gamut across all the decades and really have a great time. So wanted to invite you to come over and join us. That's Happy Hour Flicks, anywhere podcasts are found.
James Allardyce.
What's up, Matt Mundy?
Oh, man, just excited for this episode.
Yeah, that's right. We have a great episode about a great subject that is often mystifying to veteran filmmakers and new filmmakers alike.
Yeah, film distribution.
Distribution. I think, whether you are an aspiring filmmaker or you're a person who has made movies and gone through the distribution process, either way, you might still be confused by it.
Yeah, and it just seems that there's all these moving parts. I think it's great with our guest today, who's got over 30 years of experience in the independent film world. That is such a unique and spirited perspective.
Spirited is right, because I think that comes from so much experience. That's what I think is the big takeaway from this episode is there is so much insight, from his career of going through so many journeys and so many, pitfalls and things to avoid and, gripes with the industry at large, of course.
Yeah, when you're really trying to stay true to the spirit of what it is to be an independent film, how do you live in harmony or in conflict or in tension with the larger conglomerates, and how do they inform each other? And then, of course, when you're like you said, whether it's you've already had distribution before, if it's your first time, or you're just looking into getting into it, it's hard to know what to look for and feel empowered. And I feel like our guest today has a very empowered an empowering way to talk about this.
So check out the insight in the journey with our guest,
Malcolm Ingram, and his new distribution company that we'll talk about, Mercantile Instinct.
This is the
Independent
Filmmaker's Guide
from Framework Productions.
Framework
Productions.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Independent Filmmaker's Guide. I'm your host today, Matt Mundy, and we have a very special episode today with acclaimed and decorated filmmaker and documentarian, lover and ambassador of physical media, and most recently a film distributor with the launch of his new company, Mercantile Instinct, Malcolm Ingram. Malcolm, so awesome to have you. Thanks for joining us, man.
It's great to be here.
Woo! Exactly, for everybody out there. So where are we catching you today?
Where am I? I'm at my place. I just had a big standoff with my cat. I've been doing some press this morning, and she decided that she wanted my chair. So you're catching me now. I just had a standoff with my cat. She's not happy with me because I just got her off the chair.
I was going to say, I assumed the cat won, but it sounds like you have one for now. But the
for now. Yeah. Like there's a million ways she'll punish me later.
Retribution will be hell.
Yes, she's an awful cat.
So I'm in Queens right now, but I live on the Upper West Side, and I remember one of your films, Continental, right, about the in the Ansonia Hotel in the basement.
Yes, sir. Continental Baths.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's just awesome. So many. I've always loved the stories that have emerged from that building, if you will. So thank you.
Well, that's gonna be in the next thing we release. Like we're gonna release, because I have this back catalog of stuff that I made, but like distribution's just been very weird.
Yeah.
Ever since like I started in the 90s. And like my movies just had like your success was getting a DVD VHS launch, and then like my first two were narrative features, and they both got DVD. Like one got theatrical, and it's like, oh, but now it's just like the bar for like succeeding is so confusing.
it's
And
kind of hard to know how to market, mark the succeeding marks, if you will.
well, and there's just so many people in business who know nothing about business. It's really, it's just incredible. It's really like, because I've been doing this for like 30 years now. Like I started working for the Toronto Film Festival.
Yeah, you were in you were in the press room, right, with them?
I was in the press room, and like that's how, like, and then like my great story about that was like I met Quentin when he was there with Reservoir Dogs, because I was the guy who took care of posters. So I took care of, like, so I was there from the time that I worked there. I was the poster guy. So I had a bunch of old John Woo movie, and like a Hard Boiled was that year. So you wanted a Hard Boiled poster, and they're really authentic Hong Kong versions of them. So like basically he wanted to know who the poster guy was, and we met, we talked, we got along really well. And then he came down, and I'm such an idiot for not having this anymore. He came down and he gave me his cassette proof of the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack.
What?
Quentin gave me his, and you know what? I just listened to it to death and like lost it.
Right.
I imagine that would have quite value. Like, I mean, it's just like just a personal. It was a great thing to have. But yeah.
Well, and the important thing is, I mean, collection aside, the important thing is you listened to the hell out of it, and that was why you had it.
I did what I was supposed to do. I did do it. I mean, I will always open the box. I will always take the toy out of the box.
Yes, it's meant to be played with, and it's meant to be listened to. Where
you create an island of sad toys, and nobody wants that.
Sad toys and misfit toys. Those are the only islands we need. So with your start, and obviously the and the things that you have seen, I know specifically, I want to say that, so you're launching, or you just launched September 5th, the Mercantile Instinct, which is your distribution company.
Yes.
And that's mercantileinstinct.com. And I know your first your first property that you're launching is CLERK, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, aside from the fact that we can all infer why it's called CLERK, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about CLERK and its distribution, which I think is on the 26th, but you're doing pre-sales now. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'd love to walk through a little bit of CLERK and then take us into Mercantile Instinct, and then we'll kind of get into how you got there and then some of the nuts and bolts. So yeah, if you don't mind, man, just kind of walking me through CLERK and walking us through CLERK a little bit.
Okay, well, like making it or like what?
Yeah. So we know it's like you're following like what was at the time the surprise hit at Sundance of CLERKS, and so you're starting with CLERK as your first film that you're distributing on Mercantile Instinct. Yeah.
Well, I mean the reason we chose CLERK is we just had a really negative experience. We tried to do a physical media release of CLERK, and it ended up kind of falling apart. We ended up having like the movie got released with like a DVD that got released with like the last 10 minutes missing and a bunch of stuff, and it was just like there was no real quality control, and I was just like, I was really irritated. The whole experience was just it just seemed very I just didn't feel it was handled properly. And I know that there's a base out there that wants a physical copy of the movie. So I'm like, well, all it is about creating an outlet where people could actually purchase it. I don't really Kevin's base. Like they pretty much know how to track down his stuff. And I was like, well, why use a middleman? I don't really need a middleman. It's like, and the thing about it is that I don't have to, I'm not looking to make $1 million doing this. I'm not looking to be I'm doing it because it's fun. I'm doing it because the movie I'm really into physical media, and and I like Blu-ray extras, and I love all that stuff. So I created it I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to release it myself, I might as well create a company because I have a backlog of stuff that I opted not to sell to distributors because distribution's been such a mess, and I've never had an opportunity to properly deliver my work to audiences. Like they've had really good festival runs, like they've all like played like South by Southwest, won awards at festivals, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
but
I mean, but the physical, physical distribution specifically is where you want to focus on.
Well, distribution in general, but I like physical distribution just because it's what I was weaned on. It's something I understand, and it's something that, like, I mean, I think that in this world, like a big complaint everybody has is stuff is disappearing, and people are starting to realize that. People are recognizing things they love are going away, and ultimately, as we lose more and more physical media, like the studios have more control of the content because essentially, like, they could pull anything they want at any time.
Well, and I think that makes it so important, like what you're talking about, like owning something. And it's interesting because from like 2006, like, which was the peak of like DVD and physical media, and then it was like just decline. And I think what what we're getting at now is like just the more just conglomerations and power just coming into smaller and smaller places and doing what we as the fans, it's for us ostensibly, but like we're being left out. And then in 2019, which from 2006 to 2019, those physical media sales declined by 86%. But then to your point, which I think is so important, that since 2019, every year we've seen an uptick. And so people, and I think what you're getting at, and this is what sounds like what Mercantile Instinct's getting ahead of, or is playing into the trend of, we want to own it. Please don't take it from us. We are the fans. This was made for us. And where can I get it? Right? Am I speaking?
That's that's precisely what we're doing. And the thing about it is that, like, I didn't even worry about putting it on Amazon. I'm like, look, if somebody it's like we opened up an online brick and mortar store. It's like, if you want a Blu-ray copy of fucking CLERK that has all the extras and all this is where you get it. It's not on Amazon. It's not anywhere else. It's here. And then, like, that's going to be like the model of our titles. Like, it's just like, we made these movies, we stand behind them, and hopefully it gets to a point where I get to distribute other people's movies that I care about enough to take the fucking time and take my good sense and basically bring them out in the world. And as we know now, and like, as Kevin Smith, a guy I've spent a lot of time in my career about, like, that guy's, like, I remember when Mallrats came out, it was a failure. Kevin thought his career was over, and now Mallrats is the most important movie in his whole oeuvre, because that is very much kind of that's an access film. A lot of people, the first movie they see is Mallrats, because Mallrats is so ahead of its time in the pop culture references. It's ridiculous. Like, it's kind of like Mallrats was so far out of its time in its pop culture-ness that it feels like it was made yesterday. Like, Kevin was nostalgic about the 90s in the 90s.
Yeah, his nostalgia was ahead of himself. Yeah, it's a great point. And I think too, like, as artists, you and he, have very clear ideas, messages, things you want to say, things you want to share. And I know that was kind of like, and you even quote like William Goldman, who was like, nobody knows anything, to the point of stick to your image, stick to what you want to tell. And that's why, like, Mallrats is such a favorite for people today. That's why, like, Princess Bride is a favorite for people today, because he was listening to that. And I know a lot of times, and this is where, especially for our audience specifically, they have these messages, they have these films that they're doing, they're independent, directors, producers, cinematographers, getting it out there, and then they get to distribution and it's so freaky, and it's like, I don't know this. They have all the cards, and all of a sudden they lose their vision, they lose what they're trying to do, and then they get out, they just get hurt, they're lost. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about that, because it's so important in what you're doing and what you've talked about with Kevin, like what distribution does, what it should do, like how it's set up, like what is it set up to do in, licensing,
my
marketing,
experience
delivery,
with distribution,
yeah,
is
which is invaluable, by the way, just because you've had 30 years of it. So
I mean, it's pretty, unless like there's a thing, like, unless like there's a way to get your movie out there. Like the number one way to get your movie out there is getting a Sundance. You know what I mean? It's just like there's so much competition from the top.
right.
So essentially, like, you're already like, the Sundance titles are like, that is the creme de la creme of the independent cinema. Like, people plan their shoot schedules around like everybody. So you have Sundance, so that's where everybody pays the most attention.
Right.
And then it kind of like, and then festival season goes on. You have South by Southwest, which is important, but that is more now kind of a comedy fest. Like it kind of welcomes, like their big thing, I guess, is like they kind of played to the Judd, what's his face crowd? Judd Apatow crowd.
Judd Apatow, right?
Like it seems like all of his movies in his world, like Seth and all those guys, they premiere their movies at South by Southwest.
Well, and to your point, you've got like people know it's like you've got a few ways to get to distribution, be it through a sales agent or a film market or festivals, specifically something like Sundance, which can be both. And being, I think, so important because of, like you said, it's how people should do their shooting schedules around it. And then, but it's so, your experience, I know one of your films, it had its Sundance and then went into 100 different festivals. Am I right?
Yeah, no, like my first one, my first documentary, Small Town Gay Bar, we got to Sundance. And the thing about Sundance is that, like, I was spoiled by being my first one, because it's like, oh, are they all like this? Because Sundance, you just get everybody's attention. Like, I mean, like, we were in Rolling Stone, we were fucking like every film festival, like, winning awards, and I traveled over the fucking world with that movie.
Right. Well, so what was your experience then with, because you were coming into, did you come into Sundance with distribution in place or not with distribution in place? Okay.
No, we ended up like, it's funny because we early on had an offer from Weinstein.
Okay.
And Weinstein had just fucked around with, I think, there was a horrible story about him on 54 and about the gays. Because I'd worked with Breckin Meyer on a movie called Taillights Fade. And I remember on the movie 54, like Harvey got real Harvey Scissorhands. This is before anybody knew about like what a sex pig he was. Like as a character in the independent world, he was also not, like, people needed him career, but he wasn't popular because, like, they called him Harvey Scissorhands because he fucking, he would get in, like, he would chop up movies and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember there was a notorious story that the director of 54 had a really tough time. Apparently that movie, the original version of 54, which has a great cast. It's like, Mike Myers, Nev Campbell, Ryan Felipe,
right.
Salma Hayek, Breckin Meyer. It's got a great cast. But that, like, Harvey got involved because like he got rid of like a gay subplot and stuff. And I was just like, well, he's getting rid of, like, what's he gonna do? A movie called Small Town Gay Bar. I don't know if Harvey Weinstein's the guy for that. So at Sundance, like, we had an offer from them, and then we didn't go with it. And then we ended up at Showtime.
Okay.
And we also ended up at Red Envelope Entertainment, which I believe was the early version of Netflix. So that was my first go. And it was like, oh my God, this is wonderful. Like, the world is easy. And then I did Bear Nation, and that movie was already paid for by Logo. Okay. They asked me to make a bear documentary, and then they wanted just an hour version, but I made a full length version, gave them an hour version, and kind of went off with my own longer version. And then like that kind of had a good, good release. Everything came out. And then the market really, like around 2010, like once the DVD thing fell apart, everybody will tell you like independent film just died, because that was the biggest place to get your money back from the market, was the DVD. But once that market went away, like streaming is a really weird place to struggle into, just because it's just like you're competing with everything.
Well, I want to do a little bit of compare and contrast. So let's go back specifically to Small Town Gay Bar, where you didn't have distribution going in, and because if I'm not mistaken, too, Bear Nation then premiered at South by, right?
Yeah, it was Bear Nation premiered at South by.
Yeah, so Small Town Gay Bar, which premieres at Sundance, did not have distribution, but then it did initially. Then you did get through Showtime, you said, and
yes.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about like how involved you were with that, with those negotiations, kind of what that looked like, and if you remember, even if it's just like off the top of your head, because part of what film distribution, a distributor, we hope, does is like looking at contracts, so licensing and marketing, and all the EPKs and posters, and getting a PR firm and trailers, etc., and then delivering, the deliveries, the DCPs if they're going to go theatrical, or like you said, the physical media. And if there's anything, go ahead.
Okay, like to that, like we had a sales agent on that.
Great.
A sales agent named Josh Braun, who's with Submarine. They're pretty, they're pretty much like a top tier sales agent.
And did you have them? Did you have them going into South by, or did you start working with them?
No, that was
Sundance.
This is Sundance. So we had Josh Braun going in.
Okay.
Actually, initially we were going to work with John Sloss.
Okay.
But I didn't know the business at all, and I wanted somebody to explain me the business. Like I wanted to know the business, and John was really busy, and John didn't really. So me and John Sloss had a bit of a falling out, and it was neither one of our faults.
Sure.
It was just kind of like I wanted to know the business, and he was just too busy. And what I found out later is a sales agent's not going to talk to you unless they have something to tell you. And the thing about it is when you are a filmmaker, you want to constantly talk. You want updates. And a sales agent's like, look, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to pick up the phone if there's nothing to tell you. It's probably one of the biggest fights between sales agents and filmmakers is that, I mean, it took me a long, like now I recognize it. It's like people aren't going to call you unless they have something to tell you. As much as you want news, the news isn't going to be there because you want it to be there. So patience is a big part of it.
I think that's a great lesson. Yeah. Because you put your heart and soul in it. Yeah.
Because John Sloss is, he's and since then, like he's been very kind with me, but like he was originally going to be the sales agent. And then like I was just way too much of a keener for him. So then I got Josh Braun. And like Josh was great, but again, I was really young and I wanted to know information, and like I walked away from it. I walked away from, like where you're asking about, like I didn't care about theatrical, but I really wanted to know that people had a plan in mind. I didn't want to just give it. I didn't want to give it out there.
Right.
And there was one company, like we had a screening of the movie in at Frameline in San Francisco at the Castro Theater, which is like Mecca.
Yeah.
And we had a screening there, and it was like it couldn't have played better. Standing ovation, sold out, wonderful experience. And I met with the distributor the next day, and they were just kind of like, they were really negative. And I was just kind of like, and literally while we're sitting there having our meeting, like people were coming up to me being like, I was at that screening, it was amazing. And I'm kind of like, how are you trying, they're doing their sales pitch and they're trying to temper my expectations. And one thing that was really important to me was one of the bars had this big back area, and I wanted to be written in that I would pay half of it, but I wanted to have a premiere at the bar. Like, I wanted to kind of give back to that community and let them have an event. And this company said,
go into, I was going to say, go into that a little more. Yeah. So you
well,
saw
no,
the bar.
I wanted, basically one of my negotiations is that, like, I wanted us to have a premiere at one of the bars that we filmed at. Different seasons, the bar that two lesbians opened up. And it was very important to me because they were just starting as well. So I wanted to give them profile.
Right. So
essentially, like, it would just be a natural tie, and it would have been a really smart event to do.
And then
I was like, and the company just flat out said no. And I was like, okay, well, if you're not going to work, like, if you're like, literally, they wouldn't even entertain it. They're just like, no, we don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, if you're not going to work with me on this, like, fuck it. And that was a smaller independent.
Right.
It was Wolf. Like, I'll say their name. Like, Wolf, I believe they still exist. But like, my negotiations with them were like, they were awful. But apparently, like, Wolf has a really good reputation for paying returns, which is a very hard thing to get from distributors. Like, once they buy it's one thing to have your film bought, but try and get that money back off them once it's like, try and find, like, after that advance, if you're lucky, you're going to have to get advance, trying to get any more money off people, it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, and I'd love to go into that a little more, because the payment structure, the waterfall, if you will, once they talking about the different ways that can be lined up, and the money that is, let's say that there is, the reality
is it's not a waterfall, it's a dam.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. This is yeah.
But like, there's no waterfall, it's a dam. Like, you get paid your advance if you get, like, in a lot of situations I've been in, if you get paid past that, you're like,
right.
I have a company right now that we did business with that owes us like thousands and thousands of dollars, that isn't even, like, has no idea, like, they're accounting, like, they're off. Like, they've totally, like, gone against the deal. And, like, it's just kind of like, the thought is like, well, here's the reality. Everybody's like, well, I'll sue them. The reality is, suing somebody is an incredibly, incredibly expensive endeavor. So a lot of people will fuck you around knowing that you won't sue them, because the end result, it's going to cost you more to sue than what you will get in return. So, like,
right.
in that magical world where you're like, well, if something happens to me wrong, I will be able to sue them. The reality is, no, you won't, because you probably won't be able to come up with the money to, like, and the money will be in an amount that, like, to try and get it back, it just won't be financially worth it. So a lot of small movies will fucking get ripped off because essentially, like, they can't, like, they can't do an audit. They can't do that thing.
Well, and there's and there's other pitfalls, like if not knowing whether they should be recouped on revenue or profit. And if you do it on profit, you're done. But if recoupment is on revenue, then it, again, still be the dam is what you're talking about. But
well, it's a very, like, you're not going to get a net deal. You're going to, any deal you'll get will be like, you won't get a gross deal. You'll get a net deal.
Net deal, right?
Like, I don't know. I don't. Like, you got to be Matt Damon to get gross deals on stuff, right? Like, but to get net, like, most deals are based on net deals. The studio wants to make their money back before, but the studio could, like, I've always been very, very careful that, like, it's all about caps, because basically they could fucking market it to death.
Sure.
They could,
Well, I'd like to. I want to say, what, as you're going into it, like, to frame this as warnings, things to look out for. So yeah, go ahead.
No, like, basically you have to. Like, if you're dealing with any studio, you should have caps. Like, marketing caps. Like essentially a studio could basically take any profit you potentially could get and could have put it back in the marketing. They're going to be like, well, we're just trying to make it as big as possible. But you got to remember, the studio is also trying to build their brand and sell your movie. Like that's very much what they're about. So they're equally as interested in building their brand, their company, as well as they are in like selling your film.
And selling your film, building their brand versus selling your film to get you your more money.
Yeah, like no studio is in the market of making creators money. Like that's not where they. And I mean, and I believe there's quite a heavy strike on right now that kind of proves that. Like, creators are like the movie business since I started has turned into such a business. And it just seems like all the assholes who were going to go become lawyers and all that kind of shit decided they wanted to fuck models and get in the movie industry. Like it seemed to be this kind of total seismic shift in the 90s where film became cool. It's like what happened with comics. All of a sudden comics being cool, and a bunch of the assholes who would fucking like beat nerds up now fucking are all about comics. Like it's that thing where when there's money there, like those assholes, and we all know who those assholes are. Like,
right.
Go talk to any high level agent at an agency. Like it's just like, some people are just born to be pricks. And
so would you say?
And the film industry attracts a lot of people that are born to be pricks. And it didn't always used to be that.
I was going to say, I'd love to talk a little bit about seeing that change, and specifically because you overlap with comics specifically, and those two industries have changed in the last 30 years just massively. Did you see them kind of in hand in that property, or did felt like maybe comic properties were a lagging indicator as?
Well, I think two big things that kind of changed it. Like I think two of the biggest names, two seismic shifts in pop culture were Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith. Like those two people, and Kevin as much for film as comics and nerds and Star Wars and all that shit. Like Kevin was the first, beyond Spaceballs, like Kevin was the first guy to really, to bring, that Star Wars geek speak into like the mainstream. It was independent, but like people heard that and like, oh, that's what my friends sound like, but it never been represented in the media. And Quentin Tarantino made movie making look so damn cool that like people kind of want to be part of that business. Like, Quentin Tarantino, I mean, he's phenomenal. Like the word cool. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. We all grew up with Fonzie, so we all put on we all cool seems to matter. You try and pretend that cool doesn't matter, but the words like authentic and cool and all that kind of stuff, they matter. They people like being associated with cool.
Yes, exactly.
And so like Quentin Tarantino was the coolest cat. So being in the film business, and that's when you saw people pour in, like in the 90s when filmmaking was cool. And filmmaking was really cool in the 90s. And basically, the 90s build, like, 1999 is considered one of the greatest years of cinema ever. Like that was the final, like, and there are some amazing, incredible movies made in 1999.
Incredible bangers for sure.
And then it just became a business, and then it just became Marvel, and it look, like for some people, like Marvel is their Shakespeare. I get it, but I even think those people, and I think that's fine. I mean, there are classical stories are being told. Like there's nothing. I'm not a Marvel snob at all. Like I'm not that guy who's like those movies don't like. Look, no, they're this world's Shakespeare, and but I think people are starting to realize that, like, with Shakespeare, changed it up a little more. Like, that Marvel world is not fucking, like, is not changing very well at all.
Yeah, and go ahead.
No, with a lot of the, like, look at the big movie. Like, the funniest thing is, look at, like, the big movies that came out this year, and look at the movie this year will be reminded of. Like, fucking, like, a new Indiana Jones, like, big franchises came in, like Tom Cruise off of off Maverick, like huge players, and Barbie just came and fucking nailed everyone because Greta Gerwig was so smart and wrote such a smart screenplay. And Barbie is basically it's an indie film that's basically sanctioned. Like Greta Gerwig did a magic trick. She got, like,
it was almost the sleight of hand.
But it's just like she got Mattel. Like, she got, like, these, like, gold star people to put a lot of money and belief into a very complicated story that basically, like I call Barbie, like, the movie that explains the concept of why girls wore pussy hats. Like, basically, like, how fucking, like, after the election with Trump and everything, how basically women were just like, you fucking idiots. You fucking, we went this far and you're going to leave us with fucking Trump? Like, time for us to fucking take over.
Well, and to your point, like, about Greta, like, she brought in Mattel, and then it's just like, seems to circling back to what you're talking about, what's cool, what's grabbing on, and people just pulling it onto to themselves, that Mattel will more than likely now, because of her sleight of hand and mastery, if you will, make 40 more Mattel films, and
that will never be as special as that first one, and like,
not to keep her integrity, like, right?
Yeah, but the thing about it is that Greta Gerwig is, like, and I was fine with her stuff. I was never a huge Greta Gerwig fan, but, like, that movie, watching Barbie unfold, I was just like, this woman is a genius. Like, she is, like, this screenplay is magical, and the fact that she pulled it off, and all of the actors, like, everybody, like, that movie is so perfectly executed, and it's really threading a needle about, like, it gets into some very, very complicated areas. And it does so, like, fearlessly and seemingly effortlessly, and it brings you to a place at the end you're just like, and the wonderful thing is like, the last moment of that film is so fucking, it's such a wonderful moment, and it's just like, that's so funny. Like, the gynecologist joke, that is, it's such a banger, and it's such a, like,
well, you feel honored as an audience member, and I think that's kind of what a lot of the spirit of what you're saying with the indie films in the 90s is, it honored the audience. It like, you felt like you were a part of it, that you were in on everything, as opposed to being told something that,
it didn't treat it. It didn't treat you like an idiot. Like, right. I just watched the movie Go. Like, Go was such a smart little movie. Like, with Sarah Polley and and it's just kind of like that's early Doug Liman, like, that movie was totally like in like a little indie, but it's such a smart, it's so well put together. Like, the screenplay is fantastic by what's his name? He works with Tim Burton.
Yes.
John August.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and so that just makes me think. So, I mean, these are ones that obviously they have studio backing, and there's huge money there. And then we have, of course, the eternal struggle of just even today wanting to get off the ground, wanting to bring back the independent spirit, which is, I think, where the next success is going to happen. And, and as we've been talking about today with what a distributor has done, what it did for you, and then how things started to change. And then you felt this need, and you even say this, that something happened and you were like, I got to throw my hat in the ring. I got to do. And then what became Mercantile Instinct is, I'd love to talk about like how you and Mercantile Instinct are different. And and how does this relate to the quote new normal of distribution?
Well, I just felt an incredible amount of neglect. Like basically, and like I talked to people and I was just like, well, you don't know anything that I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like you're paying these people a percentage, to essentially like, they don't know more than they don't know more than I do. And essentially like a lot of people didn't know to market to Kevin's audience. I'm like, these are hungry people.
Right.
Like these people really, like they want this, like and so that really helped me inspire, like, after I had a hard problem, like, initially getting physical media out there, I was like, I'm just going to do it myself, because ultimately, if I build it, like they will come. I'm just going to build basically a brick and mortar place online. And I'm not going to worry about Amazon. I'm not going to worry about all that stuff. I'm just going to basically like put up my sign and be like, if you want a Blu-ray of CLERK, with all the extras and like, the interview with Ralph Garman and this kind of that and extras, there's only one place to get it. It's Mercantile Instinct. Come check it out. Like, and like, if you want it, that's where you go. And I'm like, and it's just kind of like, I just want to watch it grow. And the reason I'm doing it because it's fun. Like that's why we put it at VHS. It's just like because that's fun. Like, and I want to kind of like I want to be able to pivot with kind of what'll work, and I want to be able to kind of like every movie. It's not like creativity isn't cookie cutter. So releasing a movie isn't cookie cutter. Like Harvey Weinstein is not somebody we should ever bring up as anybody you should try to emulate. In only one situation, he was a master at getting his movies, like at getting movies out there, getting them seen, and like, God, I don't like to say like in any way that I'm admiring Harvey Weinstein, but it would be foolish to assume that Miramax Pictures was just Weinstein, because there was a lot of really hardworking people at Miramax. There were really incredible people that worked under really horrible conditions because of that cocksucker that like really built that company. Like Harvey Weinstein did not build Miramax. Miramax was built by some incredibly talented, diligent, hardworking people who had their finger on their pulse. And like, those are the people we celebrate. And it's a real bummer because the period of Miramax was an incredible period of film. It was very exciting, and it gave us some great filmmakers. And the fact that it's now, and now that it's going to have forever be linked to that trash, it's such a bummer, because it was a really glorious time, and the way, the movies that were discovered, it was interesting, but it's forever ruined by that scumbag.
And you say yes, and you say too, like with the creative, ways of understanding what an audience wants, how to get it out there, and then with what you're doing. And I love one of the things you say is, hopefully, if I can figure this out, I can help others with a chance to share their own stories.
That's the key, right? Like that's the dream. Like my mom always wanted me to be a teacher, and like I'm no teacher, but I'm like. It's kind of like, I'm at a period in my life where like I've been like, I've seen a lot, I've been a part of a lot, and it's just kind of like I like the documentaries I've made, and I'd like to see them get out there. And I basically spent the first half of my life, well, more than half, like making these movies, and now I'm going to spend some time getting them out there, and I'm going to use that as an experiment on how to maybe perfect a way to get people's work out there. So I'm using myself as an experiment, and it's going to be small. Like I'm not I'm not looking to compete with like an A24 like that. Like I'm not. That's not what it's about. It's just about like finding a new way, because I just like what's available to me right now. Is not anything I want to have anything to do with. I just think that like the only like the neglect, basically the false promises that distributors like you get, you're just kind of like,
yeah. Well,
it could be soul sucking, because like everybody, like nobody, like everybody makes out to make the best thing they can possibly. Everybody dreams. Everybody, being creative is a very brave thing, man. Like to put your neck on the line and being like, this is my art, and have people judge it and stuff. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. And then you bring it to like an apathetic distributor who has no real kind of like interest. Like, I don't know. I guess there's an equation now. I wouldn't even want to think like what is involved in getting a movie on Netflix, like what they're looking for.
Well, I was going to say as with say someone has, because we do, a lot of our audience are, they are independent filmmakers, and a lot of them are either making their first one or on their way to making their first one. And then of course there is that elusive, like we've been saying, it's that elusive part of getting distribution and what that looks like. And that's kind of what we've been talking about today, which has been awesome. And I love it, Malcolm. Thank you. Is I would want to know, leveraging everything, you've been through and who you are, advice for filmmakers that are currently looking for distribution.
I mean, what advice would I give?
Yeah.
I would just be ultimately realize that when you're signing away your movie, you're signing away your movie. So make sure you're comfortable who you're doing business with, because essentially, like that's it. Like these are the people you have to rely on, and and like you don't want to be in kind of. And if you do want to work with these people, like don't be adversarial, like, but try and figure out, see what plan they have for your movie. Mm-hmm. Don't necessarily think that like, just because somebody wants to buy your movie, you don't have the right to ask some questions, and you don't have a right to kind of be like anybody. If somebody's serious about your movie, they'll give you the time to talk about what they like about it, what they want to do with it, what they envision for it. And if things sound unrealistic, they usually are, because it's a very risky kind of world. And don't focus on stupid things. Like so many people are like, I want a theatrical release. It's like, no, you don't. Like a theatrical release is so expensive. Like, it's just like, every movie doesn't, like, I think it's wonderful that movie theaters are coming back and stuff, but every movie doesn't need to be seen in a movie theater. Movie theaters are great communal experiences, and I've had that. But another place is film. There is so many film festivals. Consider playing a couple of film festivals as your theatrical release. Like that's kind of like, making a film. Unfortunately, you have to think beyond just making the movie. You have to think about, well, what can I do with it after? You should think of that before you even start rolling camera. You should think about, okay, realistically, who is the market for this movie? How will this movie get out there? How will this movie get told? Because the chances are your first hit at bat, you're probably not going to make the greatest movie ever. And that's perfectly fine. But like, there's a world for movies that aren't the greatest movie ever. But you have to create your own, like, you have to help create your own audience for that, because basically, like, there's so much selection out there. There's so much shit for people to watch. You're competing for eyes from everywhere. So essentially, like, keep in mind that, like, this thing that you're making, you're gonna want to find a way for people to see it. And, like, that's just something to keep in mind. But like, and figure out also why you are making this movie. Like why, like that's another thing. Like if it's not a story that you love and that you need to tell, like why are you telling it? Don't make a movie because you think is what people want to see. Because I guarantee you don't have a fucking clue what people want to see, because nobody really does. It just kind of, the movies, if nobody knew, when I first heard of that Barbie movie, I was like, that's going to be fucking stupid. And then I saw it and I was like, oh my God, you never know you never know what it's going to be. But,
and that's the whole thing, going back to, the William Goldman, it's like, write what you want. And
nobody knows anything.
Yeah, nobody knows anything. And and of course, always keep in mind at the end of whatever you're writing now, keep in mind how you want it to be seen and who it's for, right? To your point. And that if you are fortunate enough to be in a position where you're sitting down with a distributor, they have no rights other than what you negotiate with them. There's nothing on top of that. Like they don't inherently have any more rights than what you negotiate.
No, and there is no standard deal. Like there is no standard deal. If a company wants your movie, they'll negotiate, and you get what you want. But make sure you get everything on paper, because that, like, once that deal is signed, like that's it. Like the only rule, and ultimately they can still fuck you over, because essentially, like, you won't see. I'm not saying that's everybody in the business, but I'm certainly saying it is out there. Like,
no, I mean, it's good to have the warning, because when a filmmaker comes in with such passion and has worked so hard on something, it's easy to be blinded. And I think that's kind of what so the warnings are important. It's not that you're overemphasizing. You're putting forth that they are so important because you're going to someone who doesn't have the sweat and tears in the product that you are sitting there with, correct?
Yes. And another problem too is that, like, sales agents, like, they see a lot of movies, and like getting you're not always lucky, like, because a sales agent can be very helpful. For me, I've had both good and bad experiences with sales agents. But make sure make sure you have a sales agent who believes in your movie, likes it, and will stay with it. You know what I mean? And because some sales agents will just take on a lot of stuff, and basically we'll see how things settle. And when one's getting more attention, their focus will go to that one. And then your movie will kind of be left out there. And right. So it's funny. Sales agents is a weird thing, because you don't find them, they find you. Like, if you go looking for a sales agent, they're very hard to kind of find. Like, they kind of come, like, if you get into a big festival, they'll find you.
Gotcha. Yeah, they'll come find you. That's a great point. Well, so as we're wrapping up here, Malcolm, first of all, thank you. This is invaluable. And also, where can people find out more about you and about Mercantile Instinct? Mercantileinstinct.com. Awesome. Nice and simple.
It's that simple.
I love it. Get over there. Check it out. September 26th, right? CLERK will be released.
And then we got more stuff coming down the pipe.
Love it. Well, congratulations, Malcolm. Thank you for being an amazing advocate for independent filmmakers and for this new venture with Mercantile Instinct.
We're all in it together, man.
Filmmaking is a collaborative experience, as is this podcast. So be sure to follow us on Instagram at framework_productions. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to IFG wherever you get your podcasts. But no matter where you do listen, if you could also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts specifically, that really is one of the best ways to broaden, strengthen our community, as well as just helping us make these episodes better. Speaking of, if there's something you'd like for us to cover on a future episode, we are now on Discord. Just look in the show notes for more. IFG, how movies get made. Hey friends, we just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about two personal things. First, we wanted to thank you, our listening community, and our wonderful guests, learning so much together along the way and continuing to learn, sharing our stories, making a lot of new friends, and collaborating, which is exactly what this is all about. Which also brings me to my second point. In great part to many of these new relationships, we wanted to let you know that we've taken a lot of this advice ourselves and made our own narrative feature film, Herd, H-E-R-D, Herd, which is premiering this October on Friday the 13th in select theaters as well as on VOD. Personally, I think it's the perfect kind of scary movie to watch during our favorite scary season. So we'd love for you to celebrate with us and watch Herd. You can pre-order it on Apple TV, and of course, do the communal thing, see it in theaters. Of course, for all of this, please see our show notes, but basically, we're going to keep it all updated at herd.film. That's herd.film, herd.film as well. Thank you again, and be sure to give us a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to build this community and collaborate. IFG, how movies get made.